The views expressed in this program do not necessarily reflect those of this station.
Welcome to Insights into Northeast Michigan, a WBKB News public affairs program. Insights deals with the issues affecting those in the community, as well as Northeast Michigan and the state. And now, Insights into Northeast Michigan.
Welcome everyone to another edition of Insights. I'm Bethany Richardi here on the Chinook, joined with Jim Johnson, a retired station manager at the DNR Fisheries Research Station in Alpena, and also a Besser Museum Board of Trustee. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure.
So, do you want to tell me a little bit about the history of the boat that we're sitting on right now?
Well, the history's a long one. This boat was built originally for the DNR Law Enforcement Division in 1947. And it served as a law enforcement boat, basically enforcing commercial fishing laws and monitoring commercial fishing catches until 1968, when the DNR decided to start managing the Great Lakes for sport fishing. And it was rechristened the Chinook, which were just at that time being stocked for the first time in the Great Lakes. And it became the Lake Huron Fishery Research Station's survey vessel. Back in the 1950s, the boat was actually cut in two and lengthened to 50 feet. And no, that was more recently, excuse me. That was after it was turned over to the Fisheries Division. It was lengthened. And then it was modified with gill net lifter and trawling equipment so that it could do the fishery survey work that it has done right up until last month. And as of last month, it was the oldest survey vessel of all the Great Lakes.
So do you want to tell me a little bit about the crew that works on the boat and what it looks like when you're out on Lake Huron?
Okay, yeah, and when you're fishing nets, it takes a crew of 5 or 6 people. You have the captain and the assistant captain running the boat and watching out for other vessels and making sure the boat is safely navigated, and then you have 3 people basically managing the lifting of the nets and working up the fish as we go along. And the captain and the assistant captain lend a hand whenever they can too with the fish workup. So we all work together when we can, and usually a crew of 5 can do it. Some surveys will be setting gill nets, other surveys will be lifting these gill nets, which are like a fence that lays in the bottom of the lake, but they're invisible to the fish, so they swim into the mesh and get tangled up. And then you raise the net and count the number of fish. And one of the metrics we use is the number of target fish, say lake trout, per mile of net that we caught. And then with trawling, we drag what looks like a sock behind the boat, and it picks up off the bottom of the lake small fish. That's how we get a handle on reproduction and how many little fish there are in Lake Huron and how much reproduction there is for lake trout and whitefish and that sort of thing. But the real work begins too when the fish get back to the office, and we've extracted bony structures from them so that we can age the fish, determine how old each fish is in the catch. We do diet analysis. What have they been eating? Are the alewives up? Are the alewives down? Sometimes the best way to find out is to see what's in the stomachs. When the alewives collapse, what do they eat now? Are they switching to eating whitefish? Not a good thing, because whitefish are important for the commercial fishery. Are they eating perch and walleyes? Yeah, they were eating a lot of perch. And that wasn't a good thing, because now the perch fisheries become a forage fish instead of a sport fish. We learned these things from this boat. The most important thing that we monitored, though, was number of lamprey wounds. Sea lampreys are an invasive parasite that attach to the fish, and they're basically a vampire, sucking the blood from the fish and leaving a great big bloody hole where they had attacked. Often the fish dies from the attack, but sometimes they survive the attack. And so we measure the number of these wounds that were inflicted in the current year and use a formula to determine what the mortality rate caused by lampreys was the previous year. And up until about 2000, that mortality rate was way high in Lake Huron. And we were able to direct sea lamprey control to the real problem, and fortunately the state and the federal government got together and upped the sea lamprey control budget and got better control on Lake Huron. After 2000, we saw those wounds drop dramatically. We watched lake trout numbers grow, we watched them get older and start to spawn. Now we're watching lake trout reproduce.
And you figured this all out with using this boat.
This boat was crucial to that. We
Yeah.
also found, using our trawling equipment, that when alewives collapsed, they're another invasive fish, but they're a forage fish that only gets about this big. Everybody was eating alewives. But when they collapsed, suddenly walleyes reproduced. And we found the walleye reproduction was just astronomical in Saginaw Bay the year they collapsed. Turns out the alewives must have been eating the walleye fry when the walleye were only about this big. And as soon as they were released from this pressure of alewives, the walleye population came back. And using this boat and the boat from Lake St. Clair together on Saginaw Bay, we were able to conclude that walleye were completely recovered by 2006.
So now that she's retired, what are the next steps for her?
Well, that's going to be some interesting times. The boat has a tremendous story to tell, and our objective is to tell that story at the Besser Museum. We don't have any money. The Besser Museum is entirely supported by donations and by endowments. It's not supported directly by millages or government support. We do get some grants, and we'll definitely be panhandling for grants, and if we're successful, we'll use those grants to build a Chinook display to go alongside the Catherine V display that's already there. Clarence Cross, Tuffy, is also, he's the lead on the Catherine V display. That's a commercial fishing boat of an early era, and this boat will be used to describe the changes that occurred over time in the fishery.
Awesome. So do you want to tell me a little bit about the engine here? I remember when we were out taking her last voyage the other day, that was a big significant part of it. Do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, this engine in this boat is one of the workhorses of the diesel engine industry. GM's 671 diesels powered so much equipment during World War II. They were crucial to landing craft and other, they were such a utility engine. They're a lightweight two-stroke diesel engine, which means they fire on every, just like your two-stroke lawnmower, they fire on every stroke. They're not made anymore. They changed the name to Detroit Diesel in about 1954, but this is one of the old, it says GM Diesel on it, and it was, the original diesel was put in this boat around 1950 or 52, somewhere in there. And then the original block wore out, and we found at Alpena Diesel, they offered, hey, we've got an old 671 block in a fire truck we have sitting out back. Why don't we put that in the... So we took this engine apart, took the water jackets off, put the 671 block from the fire engine in there. That's a 1954 fire engine, I believe. Wow. And put it all back together, and it's still running great. This engine is extremely reliable, and that's one of the things you can say about GM 671s is they're a very, very reliable workhorse. And you need a reliable engine when you only have one. Right. The new boat we have, the Tanner, sitting next to us here, has 2 engines, 2 steering systems, 2 transmissions. Everything's redundant, so if one system goes out, you still have the other.
And that's the one that's replacing her,
That's the one that's replacing this. Yeah, if this engine dies, you're stranded.
Yeah, out in a big Lake Huron.
Yep, and that's the nice thing about the 671s is they were so reliable, they were so tough, they just kept running and running.
Well, it definitely sounds like she has a story to tell, and I appreciate you sharing some of it with us.
Thank you.
Awesome. And don't go anywhere because we'll be right back with more.